Hello and welcome in today's session. Today, we shall be talking about the case studies with regard to environmental pollution. Environmental pollution is any discharge of material or energy into water, land, or air that causes or may cause acute or chronic loss to the Earth's ecological balance or that lowers the quality of life. Air pollution. Air pollution is also defined as the discharge into the atmosphere of foreign gases, vapors, droplets, and particulates or of excessive amounts of normal constituents either from natural sources such as volcanoes or from man's activities, and it is defined in the World Health Organization's Charter 1972. Now let us come to the case studies. London smog. The word smog is a combination of two words, smoke and fog, which refers to smoky fog. The fog in London city was so thick and polluted that it left thousands dead, wreaked havoc on London in 1952. The smoke-like pollution was so toxic, it was even reported to have choked cows to death in the fields. It was also thick, it brought road, air, and rail transportation to a virtual standstill. The smoke-laden fog shrouded the capital from Friday, 5th of December to 19th of December, 1952. While it heavily affected the population of London, causing a huge death toll and inconveniencing millions of people, the people it affected were also partly to blame for the smog. To keep warm, the people of London were burning large quantities of coal in their homes. Smoke was pouring from the chimneys of their houses and coal was used in industries that released tremendous amount of particulate matter, VCOs, NXOs, and SOs into the atmosphere where they formed industrial smog, sometimes called London smog. Under normal conditions, smoke would rise into the atmosphere and disperse, but an anticyclone was hanging over the region. This pushes air downwards, warming it as it descends. This creates an inversion where air close to the ground is cooler than the air higher above it. So when the warm smoke comes out of the chimney, it is trapped. The inversion of 1952 also trapped particles and gases emitted from factory chimneys in the London areas, along with pollution that the winds from the east had brought from industrial areas of the continent. Los Angeles smog or photochemical smog. Photochemical smog was first identified in Los Angeles in 1944. Although several other kinds of smog occur, but photochemical smog is a yellow-brown haze produced by the reaction of sunlight with exhaust from automobiles and power plants that burn coal. Ozone, nitrogen dioxide, and other volatile organic compounds that make up this smog irritate eyes and nasal passage. These are particularly dangerous to people who have various cardiac diseases, asthma, or other respiratory illnesses, and to anyone who exercises or does manual labor outdoors when smog is heavy. Now, the impacts of smog. Smog poses a serious threat to human health. It is particularly dangerous to very young children, the elderly, and anyone suffering with respiratory disease. Some constituents of smog can damage vegetation and agricultural crops. Smog conditions are worse in large cities, but due to atmospheric circulation, smog also affects rural communities that are downwind. Smog continues to grow worldwide as the human population increases and more countries become industrialized. About 4,000 people were known to have died in 1952 as a result of the smog, but it could be many more. Many people suffered from breathing and respiratory diseases-related problems. Press reports claimed that smog had affected cattle at Smithfield, travel was disrupted for days. Response to smog. A series of laws were brought in order to avoid a repeat of the situation. This included the Clean Air Acts of 1956 and 1968. These acts banned emissions of black smoke and decreed residents of urban areas and operators of factories must convert to smokeless fuels. People were given time to adapt to the new rules. However, fogs continued to be smoky for some time after the Act of 1956 was passed. In 1962, for example, 750 Londoners died as a result of a fog, but nothing on the scale of the 1952 Great Smog has ever occurred again. This kind of smog has now become a thing of the past, thanks partly to pollution legislation and also to modern developments such as the widespread use of central heating. Industrial disasters. Chernobyl nuclear plant disaster. Chernobyl is situated in the north of Ukraine, formerly known as the USSR. Chernobyl is approximately 80 miles or 128 kilometers north of the capital city of Ukraine, Kyiv. The accident at the Chernobyl atomic power station on April 26, 1986 was dangerous and vast with long-term adverse consequences. It now is viewed as one of the national disasters of the century. The most significant damage resulting from the accident was the radioactive contamination of an enormous amount of territory where conditions became harmful to life. The amount of radioactive material released was 400 times more than the amount the atomic bombing of Hiroshima released. The fallout was detected in almost all parts of Europe. Equally damaging have been the losses and discomforts that residents of the contaminated areas have endured. The incident gave rise to the necessity of developing a special legal regime for the damaged territories and creating a new legal institute to defend people in the Chernobyl ecological disaster area. Now, let's talk about the events of Chernobyl accident. April 26, 1986, and the time was 1:24 a.m. Plant exploded. 8 tons of fuel were ejected into atmosphere, including pollutanum, graphite moderator iodine-131, and cesium-137. 12 into 1018 BQ of radioactivity were released. May 2nd and 3rd, 1986, 45,000 people were evacuated. May 4, 1986, 1,69,000 people were evacuated. Later, another 2,19,000 were evacuated to comprise 4,300 square kilometers of contaminated area. Causes of the accident. There was not one cause of this accident. There were several which all contributed to it. This accident happened while testing a RMBK reactor. RMBK in Russian means a channel-type reactor of a large power. A chain reaction occurred in the reactor and got out of control, causing explosions and a huge fireball which blew off the heavy concrete and steel lid of the reactor. Major causes were design fault in RBMK reactor, a violation of procedures, breakdown of communication, lack of a safety culture in the power plant. Now, the consequences of Chernobyl accident, environmental consequences. The radioactive fallout caused radioactive material to deposit itself over large areas of ground. It has had an effect over most of the northern hemisphere in one way or another. In some local ecosystems within a 6-mile or 10-kilometer radius of the power plant, the radiation is lethally high, especially in small mammals such as mice and coniferous trees. Luckily, within 4 years of the accident, nature began to restore itself, but genetically, these plants may be scarred for life. Will cost 400 billion pounds and 200 years to totally clean up the area. Health effects caused 31 deaths incidentally, may have caused 3 lakh deaths, upwards of 20 million people exposed to radioactivity. 400 times more radiation was released by the disaster that had been by the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. The radiation caused numerous problems including Down syndrome, chromosomal aberration, mutations, leukemia, thyroid cancers, and birth defects. There was a huge increase in thyroid cancer. In Ukraine, children from birth to 15 years, this disease was found common. Psychological consequences. There has been an increase in psychological disorders such as anxiety, depression, helplessness, and other disorders which lead to mental stress. These disorders are not a consequence of radiation, but a consequence from the stress of evacuation, the lack of information given after the accident, and the stress of knowing that their health and their children's health could be affected. Economic, political, and social consequences. The worst contaminated areas were economically, socially, and politically declining as the birth rate had decreased and immigration numbers had substantially risen, which had caused a shortage in labor force. These areas could not evolve industrially or agriculturally because of strict rules that were introduced in the contaminated area. The few products made were hard to sell or export because people were aware that it had come from the Ukraine. This caused a further economic decline. Socially, people have been limited on their activities, making everyday life very difficult. Industrial disasters in India. Bhopal gas episode, a case study. Bhopal gas tragedy involving loss of numerous lives and many after effects occur on December 3, 1984 in the city of Bhopal. A highly toxic cloud of methyl isocyanate vapor burst from the Union Carbide pesticide plant. Of the 800,000 people living in Bhopal at the time, 2,000 died immediately and 300,000 were affected. MIC was a major component for the production of the pesticide 7 by the Union Carbide factory at Bhopal. This incident we now refer to as the Bhopal gas tragedy is one of the worst commercial industrial disasters in history. The outcome of the accident was a cumulative effect of the following 7 reasons. Large release of chemical from the plant, release of colorless, odorless MIC, which is highly toxic, heavily populated areas adjacent to the plant, calm weather condition bringing the vapor cloud down, leak occurs at night when people were asleep, failure or late warnings, unqualified and unwarned people working at the plant, approximately 40 tons of methyl isocyanate spilled over and caused the world's worst disaster. The number of people died in the incident was over 3,000 and the number of people injured ranged between 2 lakh to 6 lakh. Impacts of the disaster on human health. There are many impacts of the tragedy. Some of them are as follows. Most of the information on the medical consequences of Union Carbide disaster in Bhopal has been detained by the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR, 1985. The ICMR has established that the toxins from the Union Carbide factory have caused damage to the lungs, brains, kidneys, muscle, as well as the gastrointestinal, reproductive, immunological, and other systems, bronchial asthma, chlorine obstructive airways disease, recurrent chest infections, and fibrosis of the lungs, and the principal effects of exposure-induced lung injury. The prevalence of pulmonary tuberculosis among the exposed population has found to be 3 to 4 times than that of national average. The acute symptoms were burning in the respiratory tract and eyes, breathlessness, stomach pains, and vomiting. Those living in closed factory had very severe acute as well as long-term symptoms. The worst hit were children below 2 years, old people and persons with previous pulmonary diseases like chronic bronchitis and emphysema. The lungs were enlarged and edematous, showed congestion, hemorrhage and consolidation with microscopic findings such as bronchitis and pulmonary edema. In addition, the consistency of the brain was softened through cerebral edema. The kidneys showed congestion and tubular necrosis. In a large number, the liver showed fatty degeneration. Women's reproductive health was affected. Immediately after the gas leak, the stillbirth rate increased by up to 300% and the perinatal and neonatal mortality rate by 200%. Pollution in Bichri, India. Effluents from a high acid factory in Bichri village in Rajasthan have polluted the groundwater of almost 60 wells, destroying crops and orchards. The Indian Council for Enviro-Legal Action filed a case in the Supreme Court in October 1989. Despite court orders in March 1990 to remove the sludge from the factory, not only does the sludge still pollute Bichri's drinking water, but no compensation has been paid to the residents either. Chasnala mining disaster. The Chasnala mining disaster, one of the worst in India's mining history, occurred in a coal mine in Jharkhand in 1975. It was caused when faulty equipment ignited a pocket of methane gas that led to an explosion. The explosion led to mine collapse that brought in millions of gallons of water from a nearby reservoir. Nearly 700 people were killed due to explosion, mine collapse, or the flooding from the reservoir. Jaipur Oil Depot fire. The industrial disaster occurred at Indian Oil Corporation's oil depot in Rajasthan in 2009. It resulted in 12 deaths and more injuries. 500,000 people were evacuated from the area in the course of a week, the time taken to bring the fire under control. The administration had no disaster management plan and the fire personnel were insufficiently equipped to tackle the flames. Korba chimney collapse. An under construction chimney for a thermal plant under Balco's contract in Chhattisgarh collapsed in 2009, resulting in death of 45 workers. Extreme weather conditions, torrential rains, impeded the rescue efforts. The causes were found to be the use of substandard materials, technical faults in design, improper water curing, and negligence on the part of supervisors. Mayapuri radiological incident. The incident occurred in 2010 at a scrapyard in Delhi's Mayapuri when workers who were unaware of its radioactive nature dismantled an unused research irradiator. The scrapyard did not have radiation detectors and other necessary equipment for safe functioning. Bombay dockyard explosion. Around 800 people were killed in the explosion of a freighter carrying ammunition in the Victoria Dock of Mumbai in 1944. When the initial fire on the vessel could not be contained, the crew was ordered to abandon the freighter. It was followed by explosions that destroyed nearby vessels, including several of the Navy vessels, several economically developed areas in the vicinity, and fire started in the adjacent slums because of the shower of burning debris. OIL's natural gas well fire, Bhagjan, Assam, June 9, 2020. A natural gas well owned by Oil India Limited turned into an inferno in Bhagjan, Assam, next to Dibru Saikhowa National Park on June 9, 2020. The well had been continuously spamming out gas of undergoing and blowout since May 27 in Tinsukia district. 5 people died due to the gas leak in the area. The company had also appointed an environmental consultant to assess the impact of the blowout in nearby areas of the district. OIL assured that it would provide immediate financial relief of rupees 30,000 each to over 1,600 families affected. LG Polymers gas leak, Visakhapatnam, May 7, 2020. The Visakhapatnam gas leak or Visga gas leak was an industrial mishap that took place at the LG Polymers chemical plant located on the outskirts of Visakhapatnam, Andhra Pradesh during the wee hours of May 7, 2020. The resulting vapor cloud spread over a radius of around 3 kilometers. The incident claimed 11 lives, including a 6-year-old girl, and more than 1,000 fell sick due to the gas leakage. Over 350 were admitted to hospitals after toxic styrene monomer gas leaked from the chemical plant belonging to LG Polymers at RR Venkatapuram. The National Green Tribunal took suo motu cognizance of the gas leak incident. On May 8, it directed LG Polymers India to deposit an amount of 50 crore for the damage caused. So with this, the first part of this lesson comes to its conclusion. See you in another class with the other part of this particular theme. Till then, goodbye and good luck.